Hey guys, welcome back to PerkyTomato, and today my mom is going to be reading chapter 3 out of the American Girl book, Kit Learns a Lesson. Normally I read, but today she is. So if you don't already know what the series is, it's where I read one chapter out of an American Girl book in order every Friday night at 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Of course, you can watch it later though, so let's go.
Chapter 3, Spilling the Beans. A few days later, Kit's class was on the stage in the school auditorium working on the backdrop for the Thanksgiving pageant. Sterling had drawn the outline on big sheets of paper that were pinned to the curtains at the back of the stage. The boys in the class were painting in the fruits and vegetables and the cornucopia. The girls were cutting out paper turkey feathers. Sterling was standing on a stool, gluing the finished feathers onto the outlines of the giant turkeys. Mr. Fisher was far away, up in the balcony, wrestling with the spotlights, and Roger was taking advantage of his absence by being a general pain. He came over and jabbed Sterling with his paintbrush. "So, Sterling," he said, "when's the wedding for you and Kit?" It was as if Sterling hadn't heard Roger. He stepped down off his stool and calmly began brushing glue onto another batch of turkey feathers. Roger turned his back on Sterling. "Hey, Kit," he said, "what's the matter with your boyfriend? He's awful quiet." "Sterling is not my boyfriend," snapped Kit. "He and his mother pay to live at our house. They're boarders." "Oh, yeah," Roger drawled. "That's right." He plopped himself down on the stool that Sterling had been using, loudly and slowly, so that everyone could hear him. Roger said, "I heard that your family is so hard up you're running a boarding house now." He smirked. "And you're the maid." "I am not," Kit denied hotly. Of course, she had been feeling like a maid lately, but she'd never give Roger satisfaction by admitting it. "That's not what I heard," Roger taunted. "Here's you." He pretended that his paintbrush was a maid's feather duster, and he used it to brush some imaginary dust off his arms. Then he stood up, turned, and started to swagger away. It was then that Kit saw the giant turkey feathers stuck to the seat of Roger's pants. Kit touched Ruthie's arm and pointed at Roger. Ruthie chortled when she saw the feathers. "Hey, look, everybody," she called out happily, pointing to Roger's bottom. "Look at Roger, Mr. Turkey Pants." Everyone looked. The girls screamed with laughter, and the boys whistled and clapped. "Hey, Turkey Pants," Ruthie hooted. "Gobble, gobble." Kit realized with surprise that Sterling must have sneaked the gluey feathers onto the stool just as Roger sat down so they'd stick to his pants when he stood up. Roger also realized that Sterling was the one who tricked him. "You think you're pretty smart, don't you, Sterling?" he said furiously as he pulled off the gluey feathers. "Sticking your stupid turkey feathers on me. Well, at least my father hasn't flown the coop and disappeared like yours has." By now the whole class was gathered around Kit, Ruthie, Sterling, and Roger. They all looked at Sterling, waiting to hear what he'd say to Roger. But Sterling didn't say anything, and his silence exasperated Kit. "For your information, bird brain," she said to Roger, "Sterling's father sent him a letter from Chicago just a few days ago." She paused for impact. "And it had $20 in it. His mother gave $10 to my mother." Everyone gasped. $20! They whispered in amazement. "Well," sneered Roger, "that's good news for your family. Then, Kit, since your father doesn't have a job or any money." "My father says your dad used up all his savings to pay the people who worked at his car dealership," which was stupid. "No wonder no one will offer him a job." "That's not true," said Kit, outraged. "My father has job interviews all the time. Almost every day he has big, fancy lunches and meetings about jobs. He'll get one any day now. He said so." "No, he won't," said Roger. "Nobody wants your father." With that, Roger shoved his armful of sticky turkey feathers at Kit, who shoved them right back. Kit was so angry and shoved so hard that Roger staggered backward, lost his balance, and fell against a ladder that had a bucket of white paint on it. Everyone shrieked in horror and delight as the can fell over, splattered white paint on the backdrop, and clonking Roger on the head. White paint spilled over Roger's hair and face and shoulders and back and arms. It ran in rivers down Roger, striping his legs and his socks and pooling into white puddles around his shoes. "Arg!" Roger roared. He swiped his hand across his face to clear the paint out of his eyes and lunged for Kit. But at that very instant, Mr. Fisher appeared. "Stop!" he shouted. Roger stopped. Everyone was quiet. Mr. Fisher frowned as he surveyed the white mess. "Who's responsible for this?" he demanded. "Not me," said Roger. "Sterling started it. He stuck feathers on me, and then Ruthie called me Mr. and a stupid name, and Kit shoved me into the ladder. They did it, not me. They—" Mr. Fisher held up his hand. "Quiet," he said. "Roger, go to the boys' room and clean yourself up. Boys and girls, I want you to go back to the classroom and sit silently at your desks. Kit, Ruthie, and Sterling, you three stay here. I want to talk to you." Roger scuttled past Kit on his way out. "Now you're going to get it," he hissed at her, sounding pleased. "Now you'll be sorry." Kit lifted her chin. "I'm not sorry I shoved you, Roger," she said. "I'd do it again, no matter what the punishment is. I'd shove anyone who says anything mean about my dad. So watch out," added Ruthie for good measure. Roger made a face, but for once he made no smart remark in reply. When Kit, Ruthie, and Sterling were walking home from school later, the girls agreed that Mr. Fisher's punishment was not too terrible, really. They'd had to clean up the stage, and they were going to have to spend their recess time for the rest of the week, helping Sterling redo the backdrop where the white paint had spattered on it. Mr. Fisher had also decided that Kit, Ruthie, and Sterling would deliver the class's Thanksgiving basket to a soup kitchen while the rest of the class was watching the Thanksgiving pageant. "The only bad part of the punishment is missing the pageant," said Ruthie. "Especially we have to go to a soup kitchen instead. The worst part to me is that loudmouth Roger isn't being punished," said Kit. "It's not fair. He's the one who started the whole fight." "Don't worry," said Ruthie. "In fairy tales, bad guys like Roger always get their comeuppance in the end. Everyone finds out the truth eventually." That reminded Kit of something. Sterling," she said, "it would probably be better if we didn't say anything about this situation when we get home. My mother might get a little upset if she found out." "Mine too," said Sterling. His voice was serious, but Kit saw a little ghost of a smile flicker across his face. She understood. They both knew that Sterling's mother would go into absolute fits if she found out her little lamb had been part of a fight, and she'd surely come swooping down to school and insist that he couldn't possibly go to a soup kitchen. Think of the germs. "You know, Sterling," said Ruthie, "I think you're being pretty nice about this whole thing. After all, it was your drawing that was ruined by all that paint." Another smile flickered across Sterling's face. "Too bad the first Thanksgiving didn't take place during a blizzard," he said in a low voice. "Then Roger could have been the abominable snowman in the pageant." Ruthie laughed, and Kit did too. Sterling knew how to keep quiet. He did not spill the beans about the spilled paint, the fight, or the punishment. So when the day came for the trip to the soup kitchen, Kit and Sterling went off to school as if it were a normal morning. They did bring Kit's wagon with them, but the grown-ups were too busy to notice. After an early lunch at school, the rest of the class went to the pageant. Mr. Fisher helped Kit, Ruthie, and Sterling put the Thanksgiving basket into the wagon, It was heavy. Students had brought potatoes, beans, and apples. There were a few jars of preserves and 6 loaves of bread. Kit and Sterling brought a can of fruit, and Ruthie, whose family still had plenty of money, brought in a turkey that weighed 20 pounds. "The soup kitchen is down on River Street," said Mr. Fisher. "After you deliver the basket, you may go home." He paused. "Happy Thanksgiving," he said. Then he hurried off so he wouldn't miss the beginning of the pageant. Kit, Ruthie, and Sterling set out. It was a cold day. The sky was the grayish-brown color of a dirty potato, and soon it began to spit rain. Ruthie propped her umbrella up in the wagon to keep the basket dry. Kit's shoes were wet through, and her wrists were wet and chapped because her arms were too long for her coat sleeves. Her shoulders ached from pulling the heavy wagon, but Kit was not the kind of girl who wasted time feeling sorry for herself. Instead, she made up her mind to pretend that she was a newspaper reporter. As she walked along, she imagined how she would write about the people and the things she was seeing. "I'll take a turn pulling the wagon now," Ruthie offered after a while. "Thanks," said Kit. She smiled at Ruthie, who looked like a damp, overstuffed couch in her new winter coat. "This whole thing is kind of an adventure, isn't it?" "Sure," said Ruthie, only after the tiniest hesitation. "We're like the bedraggled princess in The Princess and the Pea." Kit grinned. Good old Ruthie, she thought. She has a princess for every occasion. "No one who sees us would know that this is a punishment," Kit said. "It doesn't look like one or feel like one either." "No," said Ruthie, "especially since Roger's not with us." The girls giggled, but they stopped giggling when they turned the corner onto River Street and saw the line outside the soup kitchen. It was 4 people across, and it was stretched from the door of the soup kitchen all the way to the end of the block. The people stood shoulder to shoulder, hunched against the rain. The brims of their hats were pulled low over their faces as if they were ashamed to be there and did not want to be recognized. The buildings that lined the street were as gray as the rain. They seemed to slump over as if they were ashamed too. "Oh my," said Ruthie quietly. Sterling didn't say anything, but he moved up to be next to the girls. Kit prided herself on being brave, but even she was daunted by the dreary scene before her. She squared her shoulders. "Let's go around to the back door," she suggested. "That's probably the right place to make a delivery." Kit led the way down in a small alley and around to the rear of the building. She knocked on the back door. No one answered. Kit lifted the basket out of the wagon. She took a deep breath, pushed the door open, and stepped inside. Sterling and Ruthie followed her. When they went in, they saw why no one had answered Kit's knock. It was very busy. People were rushing about with huge, steamy kettles of soup, trays of sandwiches, and pots of hot coffee. A swinging door separated the kitchen from the room where the food was served and the groceries were given away. One lady saw Kit and the others and stopped short. She peered through the steam rising off the soup she carried and asked, "May I help you?" "We're from Mr. Fisher's class," said Kit. "We have a Thanksgiving basket to donate." "Oh, yes," said the lady. "You're expected. Bless you. As you can see, my hands are full. You'll have to unpack the basket yourselves. Leave the turkey and the potatoes and all here in the kitchen. We'll use them to make tomorrow's soup. But bring the canned goods and the loaves of bread out front now. You can give them away." Kit, Ruthie, and Sterling did as they were told. After they unloaded the basket, they pushed through the swinging door from the kitchen to the front room, which was crowded with people. It smelled of soup and coffee. At round tables in the center of the room, people sat eating and drinking. Some talked quietly, but most of the people kept a polite silence, as if they did not want to call attention to themselves or make themselves known to anyone around them. Along one side of the room, there was a long table with people lined up in front of it. Kit could see only their backs as they stood patiently, holding bowls and spoons, waiting for soup to be served to them. Across the room there was another long table where a lady was handing out groceries and loaves of bread for people to take home. Rather shyly, Kit, Ruthie, and Sterling went over, put their food on the table, and stood next to her. "Thanks," said the lady. "Please give the bread to the people as they pass by." Kit, Ruthie, and Sterling kept their eyes on the bread as they handed it out. It was kinder and more respectful not to look into the faces of the people, who seemed grateful but embarrassed to be accepting free food. Most of them kept their eyes down too. Kit felt very, very sorry for them as they took their bread, murmured their thanks, and moved away. All these people have sad stories to tell, she thought. They weren't always hungry and hopeless like this, like they are now. How humiliating this must be for them. The lady handing out the groceries seemed to know some of the people. "Well, hello," she said to one man. "You're here a little later than usual today." Kit handed the man his bread. "Thank you," he said. Kit looked up, bewildered. It was Dad.
Enjoy the video? Watch my hair. Subscribe and like the video, and most of all, share the channel. I'm eating chips, by the way.